Have you ever wondered why some abandoned train stations still stand? Not because they're old or forgotten, but because something is waiting inside. And here's the thing, it's not your typical ghost. We're talking about presences that don't want to be found. Dark, twisted stories that no one dares to tell. But today, you'll hear the truth that's been hidden for way too long. You think an abandoned station is just a piece of forgotten history? Think again. What lurks in these places isn't just a memory of those who've left. No, there's something else in the shadows. Something that shouldn't be unearthed. Something that never should have been revealed. And what if I told you that by listening to these stories, you might be making a pact with what's been waiting there? What if that station already knows your name before you even step foot inside? I know you're skeptical, but these aren't just urban legends. They're real. So real that people have vanished, disappeared inside these very stations. And there's one thing they all have in common. No one leaves the same way they came in. Stick around, because in this video, you'll find out why these stations are messing with your peace of mind. You'll discover what really happens when the lights go out and the last train arrives. Now, if you're wondering what happened to those who disappeared, the answer will make you question reality itself. Because what comes next, you'll never forget. There's a chill in the air, the kind that settles deep in your bones. An unsettling quiet surrounds the abandoned train station, a place where the tracks, long silent, seem to hum with a strange energy. The faded timetables, once filled with bustling departure times, now look like forgotten promises. Only the echoes of old trains remain, lost in time, waiting to reveal their secrets. What happens when a place is left behind? When time stops, and the echoes of the past refuse to fade. These stations hold memories, not all of them pleasant, and some want to be remembered. What lies in the shadows, waiting for you to uncover it. It was a bitterly cold night when Tom, a train conductor, arrived at the once busy station for his routine check. The station had been closed for years, but maintenance crews still occasionally inspected the area. The flickering station lights barely illuminated the platform, casting long, eerie shadows. As Tom walked across the station, he noticed something odd, a faint rustling sound. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he saw it. A figure sitting on one of the broken benches, wrapped in an old, weathered coat. The figure's face was hidden, but the shape of the person seemed strangely still. "Are you waiting for a train?" Tom asked, his voice echoing through the emptiness. The figure didn't respond, but a soft, almost imperceptible motion seemed to suggest the figure was alive, or at least moving slightly. Intrigued, Tom stepped closer, his boots making faint crunching sounds on the dusty platform. But as he drew nearer, his eyes widened in shock. The figure was unmoving and not breathing. The stillness of the moment sent a shiver down his spine. A sudden gust of wind sent a flurry of leaves across the platform, and in that moment, the station lights flickered. The figure was gone. Tom spun around, heart racing. He looked at the bench where the person had been sitting, but it was empty. The rustling sound from before, it was now coming from behind the ticket booth. He cautiously approached, a cold sweat forming on his neck. When he reached the booth, he heard the softest whisper brush past his ear. "I'm still waiting." The story of Tom was just one of many, but it wasn't the last time something strange happened at this station. For years, locals spoke of another eerie event, one that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. The legend went that on certain nights, when the wind howled just right, you could hear the sound of a train approaching, but no train was ever seen. One evening, a young man named Lucas, an avid skeptic, decided to investigate the rumors. armed only with his phone to capture any strange occurrences. He made his way to the station after dark. The air was thick with dust, and the once beautiful station seemed to be fading into the earth, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim it. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the tracks. As Lucas stood by the platform, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of train wheels on the rails. The rhythmic clattering grew louder, louder, until it seemed to surround him. But when he looked, there was nothing. No train, no lights, nothing but the darkened platform before him. His heart pounded in his chest as he checked the tracks. They were perfectly intact, no sign of any train that had passed. But the sound lingered in the air, like an echo that refused to fade. He stood frozen in place, trying to comprehend what he had just heard. Suddenly, the train whistle sounded, close this time. Lucas whipped around, but there was still nothing. The station remained as desolate as ever. Then came the chilling realization. The sound was real. It wasn't just in his head. It was as if the train was always there, just beyond his reach. When he reviewed the footage on his phone later, he saw something unsettling. At the edge of the frame, a faint figure stood in the distance, a shadow blending with the dark. The whispers were there, too, barely audible but unmistakable, a voice calling his name. The following week, Lucas returned to the station, more curious than ever, hoping to uncover the truth behind the phantom train. But this time, he wasn't alone. Tom, the conductor from the earlier story, was with him, hoping to face his own lingering fears about the station. The two of them ventured deeper into the station's forgotten halls. The further they went, the colder the air grew, as if the station itself were holding its breath. At the far end of the platform, they found a locked door, an old office, once the station master's. Tom recognized it immediately. "That's where he disappeared," he muttered. Tom's voice trembled as he spoke of the station master, a man who had worked there for over 40 years, until one night he vanished without a trace. The stories surrounding his disappearance were chilling. Some said he had gone mad. Others whispered that he had found something in the station that was never meant to be found. As they approached the door, the air grew heavier. The distant sound of a train's whistle echoed through the building, sending shivers down their spines. The door creaked open with a deafening screech, revealing a dusty desk untouched by time. Suddenly, they noticed something. On the desk, a key, rusted, old, and covered in cobwebs. Tom picked it up, his fingers trembling. I don't remember seeing this before," he whispered. Just then, the lights flickered out. In the pitch-black darkness, they heard the slow tap-tap-tap of footsteps approaching. Lucas's breath hitched in his throat. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Without warning, the door behind them slammed shut. When they turned, a figure stood in the doorway, the station master. His uniform was torn, and his face a hollow mask of nothingness. He stepped forward, his voice a whisper. "I've been waiting for you." The events at the station grew more strange and sinister. As the days passed, the two men couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, following their every step. One evening, as they sat in the dimly lit waiting room, they heard the softest whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. "The last train is waiting." They looked at each other, a mixture of fear and curiosity in their eyes. The station was abandoned, yet there was a strange presence in the air, like something or someone was still waiting for their final journey. They decided to go to the platform. As they walked along the tracks, they saw it, a train, sitting in the distance. But it was old, decrepit, like something out of a nightmare. The faint glow of lanterns flickered from the windows. Neither man could understand how the train had appeared. They hadn't heard it arrive. The station was silent, yet the train was there as if it had always been waiting. As they approached, they noticed a single figure standing by the door, a woman dressed in a ghostly white gown. She held out a ticket. Without a word, she handed it to Tom. "The last ticket," she whispered. Tom took the ticket. It felt old, yellow with age. But when he looked at it, the numbers were familiar, the same ones that had been on the timetable of the station when it was still active. Suddenly, the train doors slammed shut. The woman was gone. The train slowly pulled away, vanishing into the mist. Neither Tom nor Lucas ever spoke of that night again. You've heard the stories, the whispers that linger in the shadows of abandoned train stations. But do you still believe? The wind picks up once more, and you feel the chill deep within your bones. Could it be that the station you're standing in is just as alive as the ones in these tales? Remember, in these places, time doesn't always move forward, and neither do those waiting for their last journey. As the nights passed, Tom and Lucas found themselves unable to leave the station. Each visit left them with more questions, and the chilling whispers seemed to call them back every time. It wasn't just the stories. They had experienced things themselves. But tonight would be different. On a particularly dark and stormy evening, Tom decided to go back alone, feeling an unnerving pull to return. He arrived at the station just after dusk, the wind howling through broken windows of the old station. The lights flickered and buzzed, but he paid it no mind. He had become used to the station's eerie presence. Suddenly, as Tom walked down the long, empty platform, he saw it, there at the end of the tracks, standing in the pouring rain, a figure in a conductor's uniform. His coat flapped wildly in the wind, and his face was obscured by shadows. But Tom could see his eyes, empty, hollow eyes, like two pits of darkness. Tom's heart skipped a beat. He knew something was terribly wrong. "Do you work here?" Tom called out, his voice trembling as he stepped toward the figure. The conductor didn't answer. He simply stared at Tom, unmoving, his gaze penetrating. A deep, foreboding silence fell over the platform, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the ground. Then the conductor spoke, his voice a raspy whisper that seemed to echo in Tom's mind. "The train is waiting for you." Tom's breath caught in his throat. He didn't understand what the conductor meant, but something in his words seemed to draw him in. Without thinking, he followed the conductor down the tracks toward the far end of the platform. There, in the distance, Tom saw it, a train, just like the one Lucas had seen before. But this train was different. It was ancient, covered in rust, the wheels silent as it sat motionless on the tracks. As Tom approached, he felt an unnatural chill crawl up his spine. The conductor, who had been walking ahead of him, stopped at the train's door and turned to face Tom. "You have one last chance," the conductor said, his voice low and full of something Tom couldn't understand. "To leave, to be free." Tom hesitated, his heart racing in his chest. The train, it wasn't real. It couldn't be. But as he stepped closer to it, the door creaked open on its own. The inside of the train was pitch black, the air stale and cold. But something was different this time. The moment Tom set foot on the train, a piercing whistle cut through the silence. The train began to move, slowly at first, but then with an unnatural speed, gliding down the tracks as though it was being pulled by an unseen force. Tom tried to step off, but the door slammed shut behind him. The train's lights flickered on, revealing shadowy figures seated in the windows. People who looked like they had been dead for years, their eyes vacant, staring straight ahead. They didn't move. They didn't speak. Tom tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of the train as it picked up speed. The landscape around him blurred, the station fading into the darkness behind them. The conductor stood silently at the front of the train, watching him with those hollow eyes. As the train hurtled forward, Tom realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't just a train. It was a vessel for the lost, a place where the living and the dead intersected. He tried to break free, but the train was no longer under his control. The tracks had disappeared. The train was now floating through an endless, empty void. "Where are we going?" Tom whispered, but no one answered. The only sound was a rattling of the train, the whispers of the long-dead passengers, and the haunting whistle of the conductor as he guided them further into the unknown. After Tom's disappearance, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the station was calling him back. The whispers had become louder, the presence more palpable. It was as if the station itself was alive, and it was waiting for something or someone to finish what had been started. On a moonless night, Lucas made his way back to the station. The familiar, oppressive air of decay hung around the platform like a thick fog. But this time, something was different. There was a strange anticipation in the air, like something was about to happen. Lucas walked slowly through the station, his footsteps echoing louder than usual. His flashlight illuminated the crumbling walls and the broken windows, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. As he passed the ticket booth, he noticed something that had never been there before, a single ticket lying on the counter. It was old, yellowed with age, the ink smudged and faded. But the moment he picked it up, he felt an overwhelming sensation of dread. The ticket seemed to burn in his hand. The ticket read simply, "The Last Train." A wave of cold fear washed over him. The train. It was real. It was waiting for him, just like it had waited for Tom. He turned toward the platform, his body frozen in place as he saw it. The train. It was not the same one he had seen before. This one was newer, its surface polished, the wheels gleaming in the moonlight. It was waiting at the platform, the engine softly humming as though it had been there for hours. Lucas's heart pounded as he walked toward it, unable to resist the pull of the station. He climbed aboard the train, his eyes scanning the empty seats. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust, and something else, something metallic. As the train doors slid shut behind him, Lucas turned and saw a figure standing at the far end of the car. It was a conductor, the same man who had guided Tom to his fate. His eyes were dark and empty, his uniform pristine. "The last one," the conductor said, his voice barely a whisper. Lucas tried to speak, but his throat was dry. His mind raced. He had to leave. He had to escape. But before he could move, the train began to move on its own, silently gliding down the tracks. The lights flickered out, plunging the train into darkness. The last thing Lucas saw was the conductor's cold, emotionless gaze before everything went black. Now, the station is silent once again. The wind has stopped, and the last echoes of the phantom train fade into the night. The platform stands empty, but something still lingers in the air, a presence waiting, watching. And if you listen carefully, you might hear it, a faint whistle on the wind, the distant sound of a train approaching. Maybe it's coming for you. Maybe it's already here.